Hey, welcome back to my channel, Texas Gal Treasures. In today's video, we're going to be talking about 10 brooches that are selling really well right now. The things I'm going to share with you are the brands, if there is a brand, and how to identify them. Then also we'll talk about how to discern if a brooch is selling well, especially if you don't have access to Terapeak, which is the tool that will show you the sell-through rate. So I'm going to show you a little trick that you can use if you're trying to figure this out on your own. And then also we're going to take a look at within each brand or style, which ones are worth more money versus less money. They're still selling really well, but which ones, if you see it out there, are for sure pickups. The first brooch, vintage brooch that I saw that was selling really well, and this might have to do with Valentine's Day just having passed by, so this is something to keep in mind. However, there's another seasonal brooch that's coming up that it doesn't seem to matter what time of year it is, they sell really well. So this is a vintage red Valentine brooch. As you can see here, I have got completed listings and sold selected, and there are 216 results in the last 90 days for vintage red Valentine brooch. If you're seeing red Valentine brooches or red heart brooches or things that could be categorized as Valentines or red brooches, then definitely take a look at those, pick them up, especially if you see them for fairly inexpensive. And as far as these go, let's take a look at which ones are selling for the most money. And then we'll take a look at how to figure out that sell-through rate on these and how I eyeball it if I don't have access to Terapeak or if I didn't. So I'm going to come over here and select highest first. And then I can see here which ones have sold for the most money. This one is a Yves Saint Laurent, and I'm sure I'm butchering that sold for about $99. Here's a Corocraft one that sold for $89, or best offer was taken. And here are a few others. So some of these higher priced ones, even this little plastic celluloid brooch sold for $40. So even if you see one that's just like, oh, this is just a plasticky one, it might still sell for pretty good money. Put a pin in this one right here. That's got a double whammy for our video today. So how did I figure out my sell-through rate and that this might be a good one? I did use Terapeak for research on this video, but if I didn't have access to that, you have to have an eBay store and have access to the eBay seller hub, then what would I do? So when I search and the items pop up and I'm looking at sold, so I see that there are 216 sold right here. As a good rule of thumb for myself, I try to make sure that that number is at least a third of the amount that are up for sale. This isn't like an exact science, so if you get in there and you're like, oh, you're wrong, it's 22% and not 33%. It's not an exact science. There's a lot of other things that go into this, but that's just my general rule of thumb. I like it to be 30% or more sold as far as how many are up for sale. So 216, there are 680 up for sale. So you see that's around 30%. So just divide by 3, right? It's about 30%. So let me show you another example for another one. So here I actually pulled up my vintage red Valentine's brooch. When I do it on Terapeak, it shows that it's got a 57% sell-through rate with this many sold, la-di-da. So it's not an exact science, as I said, but if I didn't have access to this, then that's kind of the rule of thumb that I use. So here I've got this vintage Rest brooch, and I'm like, oh yay, 55 results for sold. Now, if I'm using that rule of thumb, then I want to see up for sale only 150 or so, right? Anything more than that, and that shows me that it's not really selling that great. So I'm seeing 482 up for sale. So that lets me know only 55 sold from vintage Rest brooch. Probably not going to have a good sell-through rate. So when I come over here and check on Terapeak, sure enough, 7% sell-through rate, right? So there might be particular ones that sell really well in that category, but just as a blanket looking for that, maybe not. That's how I come up with that if I don't have access to Terapeak. The second vintage brooch, this time it's a brand that we're going to be looking for, and it's Schreiner. So Schreiner can sell really well, and sometimes their brooches are a little unassuming because I've seen brooches that look kind of like this that are not Schreiner, that don't sell for quite as much. Now, flower brooches and daisies and like this kind of style tend to do fairly well, but let's take a look at the maker's mark. So Schreiner, it's clearly marked Schreiner, and it can sell really well. So let's take a look at our sold. So 359 sold Schreiner brooch. These are ended recently. So you can see strawberries, just this really pretty cabochon like cluster. I don't even know. It's like a bouquet. Spiders. Look at this donkey. It looks like a donkey, right? I would not have looked at that and thought, other than the jelly belly, the like jelly belly, which that's a whole thing about calling it a jelly belly. It has to be a specific, supposedly a specific brand, like for it to be called a jelly belly. Anyway, that's a video for another time. But that cabochon that looks like a jelly bean would have made me look at it, but it's kind of funky, right? But I mean, best offer was taken, but it was listed for nearly $400. Let's take a look at the highest price so we know like which ones in this brand really sell well. And here we've got these ruffle looking flowers with the big cabochon oval in the middle, over and over again in the thousands, you guys. Schreiner. Again, this one's got that it looks like a stone in the center of it instead of glass. These big, beautiful clusters and flowers selling into the thousands. So definitely keep that one on. You may see this video, I'm prepping another video. You may see this brand again in another video. So keep that in the back of your head there. But let's take a look at that sell-through rate, right? So 359. So I'm wanting to see about, 3 times that for it to be, okay, got a good sell-through rate. So we're looking at 591. So that's more than half, right? As far as sell-through rate. So I like it when those two numbers are as close as possible, or if there's more sold than are up for sale, then that's even better. So it's got a fantastic sell-through rate. So that one definitely has a good pickup value to resell. Remember in the hearts, I said put a pin in that one. That's a micro mosaic. You've actually probably seen this in another video of mine where I talk about things that I look for when I'm thrifting. I love picking up micro mosaic stuff. Now, micro mosaic is different than Millefiori, but a lot of times you might see the name in the title here, Millefiori. Millefiori is technically where it means 1,000 flowers, and they take little pieces of glass and they fuse them and then they slice them and then they make art with them. You could have a Millefiori micro mosaic if you took the Millefiori and cut it out. Anyway, which maybe they did with the little leaves. You can see the leaves have multiple colors, so they may have done a Millefiori and a micro mosaic on this piece. I don't know the full process, but you can see here. Oh yeah, they do. See the little flowers? These little bitty ones, you can see where they would have taken the glass, fused it together, and then sliced it like that to make the Millefiori, right? And then the micro mosaic part is where they've taken the little pieces of glass and made a mosaic out of it. So this one actually has both. Sometimes you'll see both of those words or keywords in a brooch that doesn't have it for both. But because sometimes people don't know the difference, the keywords are often put in there. And it looks like these yellow, the centers of the flowers are also Millefiori. And then you think, oh, $30. Oh, it's too cheap. Because if you think about the craftsmanship. Anyway, I'll go off on a tangent as far as craftsmanship goes. When you see brooches out like that, or any kind of jewelry that's micro mosaic, truly, pick it up. So here you can see, these are sorted by ended recently, micro mosaic brooches that have sold over 1,000 in the last 90 days. And there are different styles. This is where I wanted to really come in and say, okay, these are micro mosaic, then these are micro mosaic on steroids that will sell for a ton of money. Let me show you. So a lot of them have this sort of pattern with the flowers and the clusters and things like that, and they can sell really well. But when you see them like this, that are portraits or animals or scenes like landscapes, they can really sell for a lot. Let me zoom back up to the top. We'll sort by highest price. And here you see, look at this micro mosaic with the beetle Oh my goodness, thousands, right? This one, again, it's a floral one, but it's almost like a watercolor, oil painting type thing. More oil painting than watercolor, but what do I know? Here you see again our dog. Then you see this little Roman forum. I mean, they really went to town on some of these. This one is very unique because it's just a different motif. You don't see a whole lot of seashells and things like that, right? So when you're looking at these micro mosaics, if you find one that has like a scenery or something like this, like a true like piece of art, then for sure that's the one to go for. And then there are others again that sell really well. Look at this guy. Zooming back up and let's take a look. So 1,000 results for sold and how many up for sale? We're looking at 3,600. So yeah, it's a little below the third of it, but you know, it's still like over 1,000 sold. So this is fantastic. Next up, if you are a jewelry seller, this is not going to be an unfamiliar brand for you, and it is Weiss. So Weiss is marked and it's very clearly marked. You can see there, Weiss. So results for sold on Weiss Brooches, 1,600 plus sold listings, ended recently. Here we go. Let's see. So you can see $18 here, $57 there. So which ones tend to go for a little more versus some of the lower priced ones? However, you know, if it's in a lot, you know, there's, okay, so they've got lots and lots here, people selling them in lots. And then here we go. This one, I don't know, it has all these different names in it. But here's one that's a Weiss pink rhinestone. Look, Valentine, hey, double whammy there. $250 on this one, nice. Here's another one, $250 on that one. Let's take a look at the sell-through rate here if we're going at it manually. 1,700 results for Weiss. Taking this off, how many up for sale? 4,900 plus. So yeah, it's about, you know, 2,000-ish versus 5,000-ish. So yeah, that works. Next up are Maltese crosses. I really enjoy these. I don't know what it is about them. The construction, the style, the symmetry probably, because I love symmetry. The symmetry of these are gorgeous. So Maltese crosses, they'll have this sort of cross, but symmetrical, you know, on all sides. And they can sell really well. But you see the pattern of how they look, right? Kind of like a cross, kind of squared off, right? So let's see which ones really sell for a lot of money. I see a Trifari here, one that sold for $1,200. Here's a Chanel, $600. Here we've got a Joan Rivers brooch that sold for $325 Maltese cross. So this is another double whammy. Guess who's coming up in just a minute? Miss Joan Rivers. The next brand we are looking at is Kramer. These are some examples of Kramer brooches. You see this dragon. It is Year of the Dragon, you guys. I wonder if that's why this one's really popping. However, it's a very cool brooch. So these are some different vintage Kramer brooches. You can see here that Kramer is really well marked with the name just written out. The next type of brooch isn't necessarily a brand, and it is vintage Peacock brooches. When I was doing my research, I kept noticing peacocks showing up over and over again. Some of them sell for amazing amounts of money. So let's take a look at the highest first. So looks like a peacock feather, sold for around $600. This is Marcel Boucher. And here's another, it looks like a lot from this brand, Boucher. And as you can see, 457 sold versus 1,700 up. So it's a little below that third of it, but not by too much. Next up is Joan Rivers. So these are the Joan Rivers brooches. I've talked about the uptick in Joan Rivers jewelry in a previous video. And here you can see some of them are not selling for a whole lot, but then others are selling for quite a bit. So if you see Joan Rivers brooches, definitely pick them up. And let's sort by the highest first. Here we've got the Bluebird of Happiness. That one looks like a biggie. Bluebird of Happiness is really selling for a lot of money. So if you see that one, definitely pick it up. And let's take a peek at her maker's mark while we're at it. Here's another brooch that doesn't have a specific brand. It's another holiday one that seems to sell year round, and that is a vintage Christmas tree brooch. So as you can see, there's 4,010 Christmas tree brooches sold. These are sorted by ended recently. Let's take a look at highest first. As you can see, some of them can sell into the hundreds. But let's take a look at that sell-through rate. So 4,010 results for sold. And then when I take off sold, we're looking at 10,000 plus as far as up for sale. So that's like getting close to that halfway point. Next, we're looking at Cameo. So vintage Cameo brooches. This could be shell cameos. And then there are also some vintage like lucite and like constructed Cameo brooches. They're still vintage, but they may not be made from shell. As you can see, the prices vary on these, and I've done a whole video that tells you how to age or to try to put a date on a shell cameo by the way it's carved and the techniques that were used. So I can link that video here if you're interested. And you can see here that there are lots of different price points, lots of different, like some of these like, oh, I've seen this girl before, but then you see her and you're like, whoa, I have not seen this girl before. So the quality is really dependent, or I should say, the price is dependent on the quality. So these are ended recently. Let's sort by ended highest first. They get really pricey, y'all. So here's museum quality one that's got a whole scene on it. Again, here's another one with a big scene, Zeus dog cameo. Scrolling past these lots. Sometimes they will have a brooch and a pendant in one. So here we have another one for $1,400 that sold. Next up, we're talking about uranium or Vaseline glass brooch, and I'll take those qualifiers off. So if you see just uranium glass brooch or Vaseline glass brooch, we can take a look at the prices and sold on those. But if I use both of these words, uranium, Vaseline glass brooch, we see that there are 35 results for sold. This is that uranium glass that glows under a black light because it is radioactive. It's got uranium in it, people. But very cool feature. So when I take off sold for this qualifier, uranium Vaseline glass brooch, there are 63 up for sale. Now let's just take a look at uranium glass. Uranium glass brooch, we've got 407 up for sale. And I'm going to scroll down and then select sold right here, and 151 sold with just uranium glass brooch. Now if I put in just Vaseline, we're looking at 34 up that sold, and how many up for sale? 69 up for sale. So you have to determine which keywords you're using in your listing depending on the item you've got. And just for those of you who are like, well, what's the difference between uranium glass and Vaseline glass? It says uranium glass is an older, let's see here, uranium glass is an older, more general term, sometimes used as a synonym for Vaseline glass, but it can lead to confusion because some types of glass colored with uranium, like custard glass or Burmese glass, are opaque, whereas Vaseline glass is transparent. So you might have something that is uranium glass that is not Vaseline glass because it is opaque. There were so many other types of brooches that I wanted to include in this, but I really wanted to narrow it down into 10 that you could look for that were selling really well right now. Or maybe I have 11. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Looks like I have 11. Good job counting today, Margaret. Selling is my game. Counting is not my game. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have another brooch that you would have liked to see on this list, then leave a comment down below because we're all learning from one another, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.